evening, folks. I'm David Brinkley with today's top stories. We have breaking news from Vietnam, but first we have a special interview with PFC Bob Roberts, who has just returned from Vietnam on his second tour. Please stay tuned. Good evening, folks. Thank you for tuning in to NBC Nightly News. Tonight we are here with PFC Bob Roberts. He's here to talk to us about his experiences in Vietnam and his opinion on the war. Thanks for joining us, Bob. Thank you for having me, David. So, Bob, how is your family feeling about your return? Well, David, because this was my second tour, my family did know what to expect. However, they were very pleased when I returned home because they had been hearing many stories in the news and in newspaper articles about how the war has been getting worse, and they're very excited when I returned home, as was I. How was your experience overall, and can you tell us maybe some pros and cons? Well, David, that is a very good question. There were many pros to being in Vietnam, such as meeting many soldiers from all over the country, and it felt good to be helping the United States and Vietnam from the threat of communism and things like that. However, there were many cons to it, and it proved to be very difficult. And what were some of these difficulties? For example, one of the many difficulties that soldiers face in Vietnam is booby traps, because while the Americans do set up booby traps, the Viet Cong often rewires them to use against us, and the worst part about booby traps is that is the fear of them, and while they're very easy to spot during the day, when we're out at night it is almost impossible to see them. Now, Bob, let's get down to some of the more difficult and, shall I say, controversial topics. Do you or do you not believe that the United States military should remain in the war in Vietnam? Well, David, that is a very difficult question for me to answer. However, while I was proud of the work that I achieved while I was away, I do not believe that the U.S. should remain in Vietnam for many reasons. Do you think you could possibly tell us some examples or stories of why you believe this? Of course. Getting involved in another country's civil war it has proven to be very difficult because while we are fighting for America's welfare, feels as if they're fighting for their lives. So that is one reason. Another reason is how the soldiers are being fed over Vietnam. It is very, very bad food, to be honest. We get something called sea rations, which everyone hates, and it is often cold, which just makes this disgusting fat layer on top, which is not appetizing whatsoever, and there's not enough calories for someone to intake for the amount of work that we are doing. And the final reason why I believe that the U.S. should not remain in Vietnam is the fact that we underestimated what we were going into. While we are fighting the Viet Cong, we are also fighting the harsh jungle because it has many obstacles and has proven to be very difficult. The main way that we fight in the jungle is called ambush fighting, and Another tactic that is used is called wearing the jungle, where you actually wear the jungle so that you blend in and it's more difficult to be seen. You have to be very careful out on the trails because being captured is very common and nobody wants to be a prisoner of war. The conditions are awful and who knows how long we'll be in this war. Thank you for your time, Bob. And now please stay tuned for tonight's top stories.